Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Marriage is Tougher Than Woodpecker Lips podcast. This is Brian, joined by my co host, Paul. We'd like to welcome you to a community meant for the men of the world to share their thoughts and perspectives on marriage. We can learn from each other's experiences and help each other be better husbands. This week on the pod, we want to talk to you about keeping the main thing the main thing. Let's try to eliminate distractions and focus on what we've decided as a family unit or a marriage unit our goals are going to be.
All right, and before we hop all the way in, we'd just like to say thank you. If this is the first time you've caught us, thank you for checking us out. And if you've been rocking with us for a while, we appreciate you coming back. If you'd like to go deeper in this conversation, you can reach out to us searching Marriage is Tougher on any social media platform, or you can go to marriagestougher.com, click the contact us, scroll down to the form and fill out that form. On that form, you can also fill out if you'd like to be a guest. And at that website, you can see all of our archived episodes there. But we are on all this podcast platforms, so you can look out for us there. Now let's hop into the show.
Yeah. The main thing. What is the main thing is where my mind is going right now. And initially I'm thinking like that's got to be different for everybody, right? But I think what I would like to ask you is where are y'all headed? What's your main thing?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, our main thing is walking out what the Lord has called us to do. That sounds cliche, but for us, it's really making disciples of Jesus Christ, starting with our family, um, like our kids are the unit that's right here, and then furthering that further in our family and our community, so where we live. So that plays out in different ways. It's being available for whatever the Lord has us to say or do, in from our jobs to our neighborhoods, to the different uh, activities we're involved in. Seeing every opportunity as an opportunity for God to move. And that's kind of our main thing. So it plays out differently, but it's also uh, being a good representative or a good steward of the things that He's given us. So that's our time, our family members, right? Be a good steward of, my daughter, my son, his wife, um, my wife, like making sure I pay attention to that and being a good steward of the money that we bring in, um, and any other resources that we have, whether it be things that we don't need anymore. How can we bless someone else with it? Not on the selling tip, but like, let's just be generous and give it out. Like, we don't need for anything. Because God has blessed us in that sense. So what can we give away? Is there an overabundance of anything? How can we, take care of the community, and how can we teach,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because teaching, there's knowledge that we've experienced, we've gained through life, through Holy Spirit, and how do we teach others, and give a space for people that want to learn to learn?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know if I've ever said that out loud, but that's that's pretty wild.
That was great, man. Um, so I feel like a lot of what you said also applies. Um, I think where I'm at is really learning and maybe more committing to taking that walk,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and I think I have myself pretty well identified, and I think my life is pretty well defined as far as purpose is concerned. However, if I go deeper into that conversation, I think it looks like, for me personally at least, to do that, share and teach really through this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
through my life experiences, and, you know, bringing my Christianity walk, well, actually letting that lead this walk and lead that way that I am able to teach, if that makes sense. All right. I think what I would like to do is do that a little bit more in step with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing in this moment is I need to allow her to participate. Right.
Oh,
Uh,
that's good. Tell
yeah.
me more.
So just, thinking through it in this very moment, right? We get up every Saturday morning, we record the podcast. She listens to it pretty often, if not religiously, right? And I feel like to some extent she's been excluded.
Mm.
Okay. And I think that as a team, we could really stretch our reach um, to the community, to the listeners, to our friends, our family, and really project our message maybe just a little bit more. I think even though our goal is to speak to men, um, I think having a woman's, and more specifically a wife's perspective, is probably something that we're lacking. Um, and I don't think we're necessarily going down the wrong road with what we're trying to accomplish, but I think it might be time for us to explore that. And I feel like our wives would bring a lot more perspective to some of the conversations that we're having. Um, what I also know is by starting to have conversations with our wives, much like how we discuss on the podcast, but if we were to pull them in, not only is that providing practice for what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to teach, I think it allows them, and I want to speak more specifically to my marriage, but it would allow my wife more access to share what her thoughts, perspectives, concerns, knowledge, right? So I think maybe that is something. Not only do I feel like we may need to introduce to the podcast, but I think it's something that I'm also craving.
Mm.
Um, I feel very strongly this calling on my life to share my Christianity walk in this manner. Um, just because I know what a strong marital unit can do for a community. And if we can grow that and duplicate that within other marriages, how strong of a community, which I'm also yearning for,
Mm-hmm.
that can produce. So I think that's my main thing.
Man, that's powerful, really. Um,
It feels that way.
yeah, it's it is really faith in the sense that you have not manufactured that in your mind, like the steps, like we're gonna do this. It's kind of like, this is what I want, this is my main thing. So it's like, okay, God, like, how are you gonna make this happen at this point? And obviously he'll give you the things to do. um so yeah, that is a main thing. If you want to type, the end goal is to display what a strong marriage with the foundation of God is, so that there is a community of strong marriages right where you are to affect the community where you're at.
Right. Well said.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Um, and so the main thing, I think, how to keep the main thing is to figure out first what the main thing is.
Right.
Once you have decided, so you could, there's a couple ways you can do that, right? Like separately say, this is what I think the main thing is. Then coming to your wife, this is what, what do you think the main thing is? And then, okay, what do we think the main thing is? Got it. So now that's the main thing in our marriage. And there's other main things beyond that, right? Like, first and foremost, what's the main thing for those of you that are followers of Christ? Like, what's the main thing there, right? The main thing starts off, go and make disciples, right? But then also there's, what's your specific calling, and your calling is like, how do you, like, what's the avenue that you make disciples, right?
Yeah.
What you just said, to apply that, what you just said is using this podcast as a platform. But beyond the podcast is the starter, right? So we have these conversations, you and your wife has these conversations, then you get stronger, you have conversations about marriage. Then as you go out into the world, you're more comfortable sharing because you've already shared basically 3 times, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
by
Yeah.
the time you're having this conversation with a stranger and it pops up, and you're like, oh, like, I was just talking about with my wife on this podcast. Oh, you have a podcast? Yeah, we talk about marriage. Oh, okay, so blah blah blah. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
it's this way that slowly, it's really a practice, right? You're practicing and putting into practice. Really, that's what that means. You're putting into practice those things that you've discussed, those things that you feel that you're supposed to do, and you move forward that way. So it's very important to figure out the main things of your life, and then keep them that way. Um, Now, once we do that, what do you think, Brian, are some things that would distract us from keeping the main thing the main thing?
Yeah. So there's one point I wanted to bring up as well, and I am trying to be very intentional about this, and that is my prayer walk to help ensure that this is actually what God wants of me,
Good point. Very
right?
good point.
Because I don't want to walk in something that has not been blessed by Him. Because I can just see that going very wrong.
Yeah, there's a lot of times that we do something, then we're like, "Oh God, can you bless this?" Or
Yeah,
"God, can you
yeah,
come
yeah. So
alongside?" But
I'm very careful to say, like, this is what I want, this is what we want, and trying to turn that into this is what we should do.
hmm,
Right. So I want it to be instructed, directed, commanded by God. And I'll say prayerfully hoping that I am correct in what I have ascertained from
hmm,
the responses from my prayers. Okay. Um, to your questions, how to stay on task, or, what are some of the things that uh, distract us? I think ultimately, I really just said it, is our human desires,
hmm,
right? Um, our our desire to compete with others. Okay, so if it is chasing a bigger house, a newer car, all the things that put us in debt that don't necessarily serve us. That's not to say that a house doesn't serve you, but does a bigger house serve you? Does a more expensive house actually serve you? Do you have a bunch of rooms you're not using? For what reason? To say ours is bigger than theirs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, let's start sharing. Very recently, I came to the realization that a career path that I thought I wanted to pursue is probably no longer what I want to pursue. And that is in light of some very recent events that really just doubled down on where I think my heart already was. And that looks like for me, at least in my life, I worked so hard to communicate more with my wife so I knew what her heart desired for our relationship and what that looked like. And what I've shared on the podcast before is for me to be home more often, to support her, support the household, support my children, get that quality time. And I've worked so hard to get to this point, but I also know that I have other desires, right? So it is really nailing down, why is it that I actually want that? Right. Um, and I think I've come to the place now where you either can't define why you want it, which is a sign that you should probably turn away from it, or what you thought was once important to you, you have defined no longer is. And your main thing, you are shown, needs to take precedent, or needs to be prioritized. And then you start walking out. What does it look like to actually prioritize what I've identified as my main thing? And it's not just, okay, I'm going to do this first, but also keep all the other things. There's probably going to be a lot of cutting away of those said distractions. And you have to learn to be okay with that.
Yeah, that's for sure a great point on how to keep the main thing. The main thing is to reevaluate. And if you see that some things have crept in, you have to be willing to cut them away, right? You have to, because otherwise your main thing is mushed into other things, which gets you off task. And the
Right.
other things can be good things. That's what makes it hard.
Right.
It can be strong things for your family, right? Like, if you're trying to make more money and there's an opportunity, but then the main thing, like for your example, is, you've done all this work to realize that I need to be home and be present. And, we talked about it earlier. It's just like our kids don't care if we have $10,000 in the bank or $1,000 in the bank or $1 in the bank. What they just want is our presence.
Right.
They want to see us, to hang out with us, to play with us, to know that we're there, to feel our presence. They don't know that they're feeling the presence monetarily if we're setting them up for something in the future, and that doesn't matter. And you realize that as you walk through your life and really reflect, like, as a kid, whether we had or we didn't, like, it was awesome when my parents were there. Like, I always found a way to be happy and be entertained, and whether we had a lot or we had a little. Right. So knowing, like, I had no bearing generally on like how much we had or didn't have. Obviously it's drastically different, like you can tell based on purchases and things of that nature, but like that didn't really affect my I guess, ability to find fun and my ability to want to be around my parents, right? Whether we had a lot or little, I still wanted time with them. And as I look back, I realized that was important. So just putting that into perspective, um, it doesn't matter what we're striving and then again, it's your main thing. Is your main thing to have all this money and all that stuff, and that's it? Then that might be what you need to do. But you may have to reevaluate what your main thing is as you move.
Yeah, you got me reflecting on my experiences as a child. And I think very much I was aware because of how I came up, um, what our status was. Okay. I came up in a private school. And the funny thing is, now that I'm reflecting on it, is there's levels to it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is there is always someone desiring what you have, no matter where you are.
Right.
Okay. So while I was in a private school and probably desiring what some of the other children I went to school with had, some of the cars they pulled up in, right? Maybe how I saw their parents present, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could come down to something so little as like the type of book bag they had that, if I asked for it, I knew my mother would say, no, we can't afford that.
Right.
Right. But I'm in the same school as them. Right. Now, there was also other people that could not afford to send their children to the school that I went to
Mm-hmm.
and probably looked at me the same way I was looking at those people that I was around.
Right.
Right. And all that to say that some of the best times in my life were the product of community, right? And that looks like spending time with extended family,
Mm-hmm.
neighbors, friends, um, not seeing someone trying to one up another, but just everyone coming together and contributing to a good time, to memories, to fun, right? Whether that look like, hey, I can bring the ice to, I'm going to make my special casserole, whatever, you know what I mean? Um, and I'm looking at that now and thinking to myself, there was no, not from my perspective anyway, there was no judgment there. It was, we wanted your presence, whatever you could bring, if anything, bring, but what we want is your presence.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the community would come together and just put together these fabulous gatherings. Right. And many times it could just be in a backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have to be the best backyard. It was just a place to gather. Right. We were thankful to have that space. Or we could go to a state park sometimes and have a free place to gather. It was just get there, bring the things. We'll make of it what we can.
Mm-hmm.
And more times than not, it was more than enough. Like way more than enough. Right. And it was those experiences that taught me how to interact with people, how to, at the drop of a dime, make a new friend. Those were the times where I learned to fish, right? Those were the times that I learned of my family history. And I don't know, I think I am probably in a place in my life now where I need to be the catalyst for those experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a part of the main thing, right? You talked about community and displaying community and having healthy marriages, and you can't display that if you're not out in it,
Right.
having those conversations. So it's, once we have the main thing and we talked about it, we prayed about it, how do we activate that, right? And your examples are all right in line with your main thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
keeping the main thing, not getting distracted by the things that we want or the things that we see, or just being prideful, right? Like not being humble, not asking for help or showing that you need help, right? Because that's the beauty of community. It's like common unity, right? So we're trying to do things in common for a specific goal, right? Using your example, it's, having healthy families, making the community strong. So yeah, it's got to be, you have to be open and you have to be willing to let people in, and whatever level that you're at as far as letting people in, just start small. Maybe pick, vet your people, find one person that you think is trustworthy, and kind of go for it. The thing that we have to remember is that people are people, and we have to plan, not expect, but plan that you're going to be disappointed,
Mm.
so that when it comes, you don't think like, oh my gosh, how could person A, hurt me, or person Z? Like, it's just somewhere along the lines, people are people. You just have to try to reconcile, right? Like, bring it to their attention and say, this is what happened and I was hurt. And give them a chance to apologize, because a lot of times people don't know that they've hurt you to the depth that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another way that we can get distracted by personal experiences,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where, someone hurts us real bad and we, totally abandon what the main thing is because we don't want to be hurt again, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we don't do the work to realize that we could be hurt, right? Maybe someone triggered you from something in your past that was not as big. If from a healthy place, if you're operating from a healthy place, it's not as big as when you're operating from a hurt space, right? So being open to know that there might be some things that are unhealed in you, and that when you're in community, that's the beauty of it. They can point things out and maybe stir some things up that you didn't know were still there.
Mm.
Um, and that helps keep the main thing as well.
Agreed. That's a good word, man. Um, Looks like we're up on time. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's it.
I think you wrapped it up pretty well, man. Appreciate that.
All right. Well, we appreciate you guys taking the time to observe this conversation. If you'd like to be involved with it or have any comments, please search Marriage is Tougher and then hit us on a direct message anywhere there. You can also go to marriageistoffer.com, and again, fill out the contact us form and leave any thoughts that you have about this episode. Check out all of our archived episodes. And if you'd like to be a guest, let us know. We'll reach out and make that happen. So again, thank you so much. If this affected you in any way and you can think of someone that may need to hear this, please share it with them. Hit the like wherever you are so you can be just alerted, and that, helps us out to reach more people. So we appreciate the time that you spent, and until next time, we'll chat later. Peace.